Добрий день, дякуємо всім, що ви прийшли. Мене звати Ольга Руденко, я головна редакторка видання Kyiv Independent і маю велике задоволення сьогодні модерувати цей паблік ток з Пітером Померанцевим. Пітер – британський журналіст і письменник, який написав 3 книги про пропаганду. І він тут, щоб поговорити про свою останню книгу, яка називається «How to win an information war» – «Як виграти інформаційну війну». І оскільки предмет книги дуже дотичний до реальності сьогоднішньої, ми також поговоримо про інформацію, дезінформацію, пропаганду, війну і так далі. Маленьке оголошення на початку. Початок цієї панелі, початок цього івенту буде українською мовою, але надалі ми перейдемо на англійську. Тому, будь ласка, якщо ви не розумієте англійську, а тим паче британську англійську Пітера, то ось там, в кінці, біля дальньої колони, там, де є камера, там можна взяти перекладачі. Там можна взяти навушники, і там буде синхронний переклад з англійської. Я бачу, що кілька людей пішли. Це хороша ідея. Окей. Що ж, на початку я хочу сказати, що коли мені запропонували модерувати цю розмову, я погодилась швидше, ніж на будь-яку іншу публічний виступ, тому що так сталося, що рік тому я прочитала цю книгу. Коли мені пропонували це робити, вони не знали, що я прочитала, але я прочитала рік тому. І знаєте, є такі бісячі люди, які, коли їм щось сподобалось, вони нав'язують це всім своїм друзям і кажуть, обов'язково прочитайте це. Ось це була я. Я рік проповідувала цю книжку і переконувала всіх її прочитати. Тому мені дуже-дуже цікаво мати можливість поговорити з вами про неї. І найперше питання. Пітере, можете пояснити, чому ця книга і також, чому ми зараз говоримо українською?
Окей, я трошки хвилююсь, це мій перший виступ українською мовою. Дякую за вашу підтримку. Читачі, які знають мою останню книгу, це не пропаганда. Ви вже знаєте, що я народився тут, в Києві, але мене було 9 місяців, як моїх батьків вислали від Радянського Союзу. Це була така тупова, жахлива радянська історія. Мій тато був дисидентом. Коли моя мама була вагітна мною, вона к нам приходила КГБ, були допити, арешти друзів моїх батьків, Світлічних, Осік Дісельза. І коли мені було 9 місяців, нас вислали. І я вирос в Англії, в Німеччині, в Празі. І зараз я живу в Сполучених Штатах, поки мене оттуда не вислали. Чому я так багато розмовляю про свою особисту історію? Це моя 3-я книга, і це історична книга. Це історія про те, як британці намагались зруйнувати нацистську пропаганду. Але це моя сама особиста книга. Там небагато про мене, але головний герой, Сефтон Делмер, він трошки схож на мене. Він теж народився в диктатурі в Німеччині. Потім, коли він був дитиною, він переїхав до Англії. Він теж багато переїжджав з одної країни на іншу. І в якомусь сенсі він не знав, хто він. Він завжди шукав себе місце. Але як наслідок того, що він так багато виїжджав, що він жив в різних країнах, він зрозумів силу пропаганди. І сила пропаганди, вона не пов'язана з інформацією та дезінформацією, правдою, брехньою. Вона пов'язана з силой пропаганди, як вона створює ідентичність, як вона створює, як ти знаєш, хто ти. І це мене було дуже близько. І сьогодні ми будемо, я буду намагатися розмовляти українською, коли там твої запитання про речі більш такі особисті, а потім перейдемо на англійську мову про більш такі загальні теми, геополітичні.
Добре. Скажи, будь ласка, ти, можна на ти? Ми не обговорили цей момент. Можна на ти?
Можна.
Так. Ця книга вже третя. І коли ти обрав тему книги? Коли ти почав працювати над нею?
Я писав книгу в перші 2 роки повномасштабного вторгнення. І там було багато моментів, коли теперішнє і минуле, як ти там, переплетались.
Я, власне, про це хотіла спитати, тому що предмет книги настільки близький до того, що відбувається зараз, тому що Друга світова війна, вона стала взагалі для нас таким нескінченним джерелом порівнянь, паралелей і так далі, в тому числі в тому, що стосується інформаційної війни.
Дивіться, не тільки про інформаційну війну. Я, після там 3-го тижня війни, я був багато тут. 30% свого часу я був тут перші 2 роки війни. Вибачте. І там було багато таких цікавих моментів. Я писав глави моєї книги, коли мої герої ховались в лондонському метро від нацистських бомб. І тимчасово моя дівчина, коли я пишу ці глави, моя дівчина мене дзвонить і мене розповідає, що зараз буде такі нові речі, як шахеди. Це були перші шахеди. І мені було потрібно йти в метро, і там я працював над главами, там, де мої герої були в лондонському метро.
Повне занурення в тему.
Все так, всі так переплеталися, але найважніше запитання про інформаційну війну. Ті виклики, які були у мого героя Сефтон Делмера, вони дуже схожі на ті виклики, які у України сьогодні. Сефтон Делмер, він був один із керівників британської контрпропаганди. Так? Він зробив майже 20 радіостанцій, які намагались впливати на німців. Да? Але у нього було багато конфліктів з іншими міністрами, з іншими керівниками британської контрпропаганди. Тому що вони, більшість з них, вони завжди шукали то, що вони називали хороших німців, the good Germans. Вони були переконані, що в Німеччині на час війни ховаються велика кількість людей, які секретні демократи, які вірять в демократичні та ліберальні цінності. І треба просто переконувати їх, що війна погана, і вони зупинять Гітлера. Сефтон Делмер, він так не думав. Да? Він народився в Німеччині, він багато жив в Німеччині. Він сам бачив, як німці полюбили Гітлера, як їм сподобалась нацистська пропаганда. Він не думав, що є хороші німці. Є індивідуальні хороші людини, да? Він працював з багато німцями, але як політична сила, їх просто немає. І він використав свої медіа дуже прицільно, щоб зруйнувати ефективність збройних сил, щоб зруйнувати економіку Німеччини, щоб сварити армію Збройної сили та нацистською партією. Але щоб ефективно робити такі великі психологічні операції, йому було потрібно розуміти, чому нацистська пропаганда ефективна, в чому її сила. І для цього йому було потрібно використати багато інсайтів від психології, від мистецтва. У його в команді були письменники, психоаналітики, зірки кабаре німецького, драматурги. Його операції, вони були такий суміш між книжним арсеналом та СБУ. І це мене дуже близько. Тому що моя остання книга – це не пропаганда. Там, де є історія моєго тати, моїх батьків. Вона теж про те, як мистецтво і поезія дають опір пропаганді. Там була історія кухонна. Да? Мій тату там друкували в саміздаті. Да? А тут Делмер використовував інсайти мистецтва для такої великої збройної психологічної сили.
Мені здається, ми, може, і не перейдемо на англійську, тому що твоя українська чудова. Але в будь-який момент, коли захочеш, коли скажеш, ось ця тема, на яку я краще говорю англійською, можеш сказати. Я хотіла запитати, тому що ти сказав, що... тобто, давай підсумуємо. Іде війна. Люди десь є в Британії, які вірять, що серед німців є хороші німці, які прагнуть до демократії, але вони під режимом, який диктує їм інші цінності і змушує їх воювати. Щось нагадує, так? Для мене це паралель з тим, як, на жаль, на Заході існує міфологія про те, що є така справжня Росія, яка справжня демократична Росія, і це війна Путіна, а не Росії, а Росія не хоче воювати, але їх обманув Путін, і їх треба просто підтримати і звільнити, допомогти їм в якийсь момент скинути Путіна. І тобто оце сподівання на те, яке підтримується хорошими росіянами на Заході, про те, що існує інша Росія, яка не прагне війни, і вона дуже велика насправді, просто вона під владою Путіна, так? І при цьому є наш погляд український, який йде з того, що ми досить добре знаємо Росію. Ми досить добре знаємо росіян, ми розуміємо мову, ми чуємо, що вони кажуть в державних медіа, яка пропаганда йде і так далі. Ми чуємо їх ближче, і ми розуміємо їх ближче. І ми не віримо в це. І ось мені це нагадує те, як ти розказуєш, що Сефтон Делмер, який жив в Німеччині і потім опинився в Британії, сказав, ні, вони не хочуть ліберальних цінностей, і працювати треба по-іншому. Треба просто, бо як ти сказав, що він бачив, як німці полюбили Гітлера. Так? Тобі ця паралель, does it make sense to you? Тобі це, да чи ні?
I mean, that's the reason I wrote the book. So, yes.
Okay, тут ми переходимо на перекладачі.
Дивись, багато лінгвістів доводять, що рівень мови дітей, які виїжджають із країни, він залишається на рівні віку, коли вони були, які вони виїхали. Я розмовляю як такий геніальний 9-місячний немовля, а зараз ми переходимо на більш такі абстрактні, загальні, філософські, академічні теми. Я буду використовувати мою більш дорослу мову. That's the reason I wrote the book. Для мене Делмер зовсім сучасний герой.
Ти визначишся з мовою, тому що люди мають знімати або вдягати навушник.
English is fine.
English is fine. So that's why you wrote the book. Does the parallel make sense to you?
Of course. Yes, totally.
Really?
I think Delmer would have completely understood the arguments that Ukrainians make. But then, you know, he organized a hugely successful information war with that insight. I mean, to be clear, 50% of German soldiers listen to his media. Imagine we could create media where 50% of Russian soldiers tuned in. His media were among the top 3 in the big cities in Munich. Again, imagine if we could do something of that power.
I think we need to clarify for the audience that Germans were listening to this thinking that they're listening to an opposition German station.
Not only. So Delma created dozens of stations. His first station was almost as if Prigozhin would have his own radio station. It was a far-right German station full of
Warmongering. Right?
Warmongering, pornography, and anger. Fury at the Nazi party that the war wasn't being organized in an effective way. And it said things about the Nazi leadership that hadn't been heard in Germany. That was in 1941.
Can you maybe give some examples? Because I think to people who don't know the book or don't know the story of the station, the word pornography just came out of nowhere.
Okay.
How was pornography a part of an anti-Nazi propaganda radio station in the 1940s?
So his station, it's worth taking a step back. Why pornography?
I bet people didn't expect this.
Oh no!
You're saying why pornography?
Why pornography will help us defeat Putin? Look, Delma understood that the power of Nazi propaganda was connected to the way it tapped into sexual desire, the way it tapped into anger, viciousness, hatred. And his idea was that you have to break the Nazis' monopoly on these feelings. You would have to create media that was not like the BBC. Yeah? You would have to create media that was also full of fury and sex and all the things which make up psychological power. And the shows were full of these really rather incredible scenes of sadomasochistic sex where
the orgies of the Nazi party leadership.
The orgy, well, not just the leadership, but like middle ranking. He was going for the middle ranking.
And the idea was that while you regular Germans are suffering, this is, you know, they're indulging themselves in everything.
Yes. The idea was to show while you're on the front, while your son's on the front, these guys are having these sadomasochistic orgies, often in monasteries.
Okay, I forgot the detail from the book.
Yeah.
In monasteries.
Some of the best orgies are in monasteries.
But
the idea was, and he was talking about corruption. But the idea was to say to people, look, your bosses are corrupt. Your bosses are enjoying themselves. So should you. You know, it was a fake outrage. It was like he was trying to normalize this behavior. He wanted to make Germans more corrupt, not less corrupt. Yeah? By showing them that their superiors are corrupt, the idea was, you can be corrupt too. You don't need to fight effectively. You don't need to take part in this offensive. It's fine to just go and look out for yourself. So he wasn't trying to clean up corruption. He was trying to encourage sexual corruption and financial corruption. So, but this radio station, this is the first one that he made. And that did pretend to be a genuine far-right station. But basically, the Nazis worked out that it was the British pretty fast. And basically that station, it kind of faded pretty fast. It was spectacular. It broke taboos. Huge amounts of people listened to it. I mean, you have these diaries of Erich Kästner, the great German writer who you all know, writing in his diaries like, everybody is listening to this station. You know, the things they say is amazing. But pretty soon it was busted. And that's a lesson today. If you're going to do fake news, it'll be busted very fast. It was busted, revealed to be British quickly then, within 6 months. And so basically, Delmer realized that anything he did would be discovered. Anything big he did would be discovered. So he did something else. He created these very big media with music, with news, which officially pretended to be Nazi media. So they were branded as Nazi media. But the listeners were meant to know that this was the British pretending to be Nazis. There were two reasons for that.
How was that done?
It was obvious, because they would give a speech from Hitler, the news from the front, which was really negative. It's like, I am a soldier on the front, and we have just lost the last 5 battles, and the generals are idiots. So it was obvious that it wasn't Nazi.
And then jazz music after that.
And then some jazz music afterwards. But there were 2 reasons. One was for safety. Yeah? If the Gestapo came and said, you're listening to the British, you could say, I thought it was a Nazi station. So there was safety. But that wasn't the main reason. The main reason was psychological. Delmer was welcoming people into a kind of masquerade. You were tuning into a radio that pretended to be Nazi, which you knew wasn't Nazi, but you knew the people who created it knew that you knew it wasn't Nazi. You were together in a kind of game. You were putting on a mask together. And Delmer understood on a very deep level that you can only get to the truth when you put on a mask. You can only be yourself in a society like Nazi Germany. You can only say what you think when you have a mask. The way literature reveals much bigger truths than journalism, Najal. He was creating this sort of game where people would leave the Nazi psychological community and join a different one. And I think that was his great insight and his great genius. He saw all life as theater. The Nazis for him were this gruesome cabaret where you could act a certain version of yourself. It allowed you to be a sadist. It allowed you to feel superior. It allowed you to feel part of a community of the Nazi party. He was saying, come and join this community, which understands you better than the Nazis. Because the news, the information on the stations, told the stories of soldiers and ordinary people better than Nazi propaganda. Yeah? So he was saying, you don't need to be part of that community. I know you better. So there was pornography, but there was also this incredibly deep understanding of people's relationship with propaganda.
That's something I actually wanted to mention to the audience, because so the book is great for 2 reasons. One, it's just an exciting narrative about this adventure of setting up the station, and it's really interesting to read. But also, it's for me, it's been like one of the most insightful things I've ever read about propaganda, and it's what Peter just mentioned. That was like I have a whole batch of notes that I made when I was, well, to be honest, listening to the book, not reading it. So every note I made was like me on my walk to the office, like stopping on the sidewalk, annoying people, and like writing it.
I got to choose the actor. Was it the best actor to read it? Did you like the reading?
I really liked the reading, yes. Yes.
That was my only input. I got to choose between 5 actors.
That's really, I can really vouch for that. Anyways, this is what Peter mentioned. It was like my most, out of all my notes, it's something that really is, you know, the most memorable thing to me is the insight about propaganda. And this is something that may seem very, you know, superficial and simple for you because you wrote 3 books about propaganda. But I think most people here don't have the same understanding of what propaganda is. Because if you ask somebody, You know, if you just pull somebody from the crowd at the Arsenal and you ask what they think, what's the definition of propaganda, what does propaganda do, the answer normally is going to be that propaganda makes you believe in a lie. But what you explain in the book so well is how the role of propaganda is actually to, as you said, to tell you something about yourself, to help you find your identity and give you the sense of belonging to a community. And that's why it works best with people who feel like outsiders on some level. And pretty much everybody feels like an outsider at some point, right? This is a very natural feeling.
Yeah. Look, there are moments when propaganda can persuade, but some of the most powerful propaganda doesn't persuade. It legitimizes what you wanted to do. So I remember coming to XIII, the days after it was liberated in the Chernihiv region. You know, I'm sure you all remember, it's this village where 300 villagers were kept for a month in the cellar. And I saw the newspapers that the Russian soldiers had been reading, which had been delivered to them, which were all about how we are liberating Ukraine from the Nazis and helping the Russian speakers. And look, the soldiers who'd spent a month torturing people knew that these people did not want to be liberated, that they could all speak Russian or Belarusian, it's near the border, whatever language they wanted in their lives. They knew the reason was fake. If anyone had believed it before the invasion, after a month they definitely knew. They'd been told by the people. And yet they continued hurting them, torturing them, murdering them. So that's not about convincing. All the propaganda was doing was allowing them to be the sadists that they wanted to be. And Delma's attitude to the Nazis was very similar. He didn't believe in brainwashing, and I don't really believe in brainwashing. I think it's an unhelpful term. He saw how Nazi propaganda allowed often very repressed Germans to indulge their anger, their sadism, their pornographic fantasies as well. It took control of their passions and libidos, and it normalized evil. So yeah, I'm not sure brainwashing or persuasion, that is part of propaganda, of course it is. But I don't think it's the really powerful part.
And this point of view really moves the accountability, the weight of responsibility and accountability to the people or the nation that has been, well, I'm thinking obviously about Russians, and I'm thinking about how, again, coming back to the point that a lot of people believe that they've been brainwashed. But brainwashed, I agree, I hate the term because it just takes away all the responsibility from the person, because you can't, to brainwash somebody into murdering someone, you need to have something there. It's not something that somebody can be persuaded to do. And I think the book is also great in showing that. But I want to talk about also something else, which is, and this is something I kept thinking when I was listening to the book. If Sefton Delmer, this really, really talented propagandist, happened to be headhunted by the Ukrainian government now, with the task to repeat what he was doing to the Germans during the Second World War, but to do it to the Russians, what would he do? And maybe he wouldn't even manage to do anything. Maybe like what he believed worked doesn't work anymore. Would he have a role?
No, look, first the Ukrainians, and I think these stories will be told after the war, Ukrainians are doing a huge amount. And it's been amazing to see how civil society, often people from IT, marketing, have been working with the army to do lots of campaigns. And I think, look, we all know anecdotes about these, but I think these stories will be told later, because by definition they're secret. And my Ukrainian friends who work on similar campaigns, they love the book, firstly. They were giving the book out in their offices, which is great. But it's a question of scale. Yeah? There's people doing things. But to get to scale today, you need to be doing things at the level the Russians do them. Frankly, they take this stuff seriously. They have TV channels, troll farms, assassinations, all working together in one huge, many departments. They have their oligarchs working on it. They have the Russian church working on it. They have built up a huge machine. Ukraine is fighting every day to survive. Obviously, its focus is on, you know, psychological operations to do with conscription in the army. That makes complete sense. But Delma was doing much more than that. Delma had the might of the British Empire behind him. It was an existential fight. He starts working in 41 when Britain is alone and all resources are given to him. He wants the best psychoanalyst in the world, he gets him. He wants, give me, you know, 1,000 German POWs to give me information about the mood on the front, he gets them. It's a case of scale. To understand, he managed to get, not the BBC, he managed to get the British government to buy him the biggest transistor in the world, the biggest radio transistor in the world. It was in America. It was a huge deal. The BBC wanted it. He was like, no, 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 my radios are more important. He got it. It had the biggest reach anywhere in the world. So he had the most powerful technology in the world on his side. So if we were to do this, we would have to have not just this on our side, not just the talent of Ukrainians, but Sergey Brin would have to be on our side. Yeah? We would need...
we would need to buy Telegram from Durov, probably.
We'd have to probably seize Durov and make sure he's working for us. But
which who knows, we haven't yet, right?
Well, he has a tendency to land his plane in the wrong place, so maybe. But what I mean is, in terms of insight, Ukrainians are learning every day, and they know a lot already. But you've got to understand scale. Yes, until we have produced our own platform that is being used for this purpose, the way the Russians do with Kontaktia, it's very hard for us to compete. So at one point, yes, business, technology, all these people will have to be brought in. But in terms of insights, I think Ukrainians will teach the rest of the world.
Okay, someone just showed me a 15-minute sign, but I thought we had until 4. So that was my doing no. Anyways, I just wanted to also mention that with the resources came scrutiny for him, because the people from the British government and even from the royal family started getting, you know, becoming interested in what's been going on. And I remember one moment in the book when I think the king and his wife are given like a tour of the operation, and they are and people doing the radio station are a little not so comfortable about that, because they're doing some pornographic stuff, and the king is supposed to walk in. And then there is this moment when, which is actually interesting to relate to some of the things we experience here, when a member of British Parliament, learned that this horrible pornographic German station is actually a British operation, and he writes a letter to somebody who's a superior of Sergeant Delmer, saying basically, well, expressing his outrage, but also saying, if we win the war like this, then it's not worth. The victory is not worth it if we win it like this, which is of course something, a very interesting anecdote.
Look, Delmer faced opposition non-stop. So there were people who didn't want him to be using pornography, swear words. They thought that was un-British. And he had to defend himself. Why? There were these wonderful letters that I found in the archive of him sort of writing why pornography is very important, how Germans are all sadomasochists, how Germans love perverted sex, unlike the British, of course. But the Germans, they really need this, or else they won't tune in, you know, stuff like this. So that was very funny, especially because the British are famous for loving sadomasochistic sex. But still, that's how you have to...
I didn't know that.
No, it's called the English disease. I
learned something new today.
But the main opposition he faced wasn't that. The main opposition he faced was from other people who genuinely believed that basically a socialist democratic revolution would happen in Germany. And they were controlling other stations. They were controlling stations which would have speeches about, oh, Germans, believe in the future of democratic socialism. Our glorious future will come. Fascism is evil. While Delma was making pornography. And his biggest conflicts was with them. And they would try to get him taken off air. They would try to get him thrown out of government. So his biggest battle was with these others who were looking for the good Germans.
So there's, of course, a rather obvious parallel here between, you know, the two schools of thought on how to deal with disinformation, which is one, you know, the purists who think that only, you know, you tell the true story and you hope that it's stronger than the lie. And then the second school of thought, which is like you need to, you know, to show up for the battle because it's a war and you need to not be above that. You don't do like, you know, when they go low, we go high because that doesn't work. What is your school of thought? Like if, I mean, especially for me as a journalist, it's a question that I get asked a lot. How can you not turn into a propagandist if you're a Ukrainian journalist covering the war? Like, so between the two things, like you do, like, you know, you tell the true story, pure journalism, you ignore disinformation, or you're completely reactive and you treat it as a battle that you need to show up to.
Okay, I think these are very different things. So let's start with your difficulty as a journalist in Ukraine, and let's look at the history. So for domestic audiences in English, there was a huge battle at the BBC in around 1940-41. Should the BBC tell the truth about British defeats in the war? Because a lot of people said that would be bad for confidence, for the spirit, for patriotism. Why is the BBC telling about dreadful military decisions that have led to loss of life and defeats? And after a lot of debate, you know, the government decided that, and the BBC insisted that, they had to tell the truth. Because more important than the sense of confidence was trust. And if you lose the trust of the population, if they think you as the leaders of Ukraine or Britain are not telling the truth about defeats, you will lose trust, and then the enemy can come in and start telling them, do you know you're being lied to? And if you are being lied to, that'll be very effective. So they took this very tough decision in 1941 that the BBC in English would tell the full truth about what is going on the front. No one had done that before. That was a decision based on the truth, but also about what works. Delma's communication to Germany was something different. Delma didn't think that in a dictatorship like Germany, journalism in its classic form played a big role. Journalism is part of a democratic ecosystem. You know, you have journalism that influences politicians, that influences elections, they are held accountable. He didn't see that in Germany. By 1941, all you had to do was make sure you won. And the role of information, in that sense, was to help the military to achieve their aims. get soldiers to desert, encourage economic crises, make the leadership paranoid. He did not call it journalism. He did not think this was journalism. After the war, he went back to being a journalist. But in the height of the war, he was very happy to be called a propagandist. However, he was very reluctant to use lies. He did when he had no choice, or he did very tactically. The path to getting German soldiers to defect, the path to creating chaos in the Nazi elites, was to find out more truth about their lives than they had. Most of his work was research. He had French...
That was almost like investigative journalism, basically.
Yeah. So, look, he was doing OSINT. He was opening letters that mid-level German officials were sending abroad to find out what they had for dinner. So he could broadcast, this Nazi official had 5 pheasants for dinner or something.
He could have easily made it up, but he instead was looking
But it was
for
much more powerful if you know the truth. Because that makes them worried. You're trying to make them paranoid. If you've made something up, they're like, oh, it's bullshit. If you found out the truth about them, they're like, how the fuck? Who told him? Also, the British government in POW camps, so camps where there were German prisoners of war, they put microphones, secret ones, everywhere, to listen to everything they said. So they knew the latest jokes, the latest gossip, the latest little secrets soldiers told each other, and they could use that. So an early form of hacking. He worked with partisans, French partisans, who he would send to brothels, whorehouses, in Calais, to find out which venereal disease, which prostitute was giving people, which officer or general was spending too much time at the brothel. So he had all this information, plus, it goes on and on. The information gathering was incredible. Today, we can do it so much easier. We can follow the social media of soldiers. We have so many перехваты of soldiers talking to each other. We have so many leaked emails from across the Russian government. We're just not using them in an effective way. So Delma today would be in heaven.
We have 5 minutes left. I think, I could be asking questions for 50 more minutes, but I want to give a chance to 1 or 2 people in the audience. 1-2 питання з залу ми можемо взяти. Будь ласка, підніміть руку, якщо ви хочете щось запитати, і вам, у нас є мікрофон, здається. Питання з залу по пропаганді. У нас є одне. Будь ласка, мікрофон. Ось тут. Мав бути мікрофон. Сказали, мав бути мікрофон. Це була пропаганда, так? Окей. Сказали, що мав бути мікрофон, але це неправда, тому я зараз... Ні.
Окей.
Добре. Вітаю, дякую, що ділитеся своїми думками. Питання, може, не зовсім... Так. По пропаганді, але по справді таке питання. Чи не думаєте ви, що ця ідея постправди, ви про це багато вивчаєте, говорите і пишете, і пропаганда, і те, як Росія це використовує на свій рахунок, заводить нас в такий дуже небезпечний, нас як світ в цілому, Європу, і, можливо, щось треба з цим робити, виходити з цієї ідеї постправди, і які взагалі перспективи? Дякую.
То нам всім кінець, як суспільство, через постправду чи ні? Do you need help with the...
No. We are losing. Let's be honest. But we have to be precise about what we are losing. We are losing the hope for an idea of democracy, which was always a bit of a fantasy, but which was noble. You know, this idea that we live in a public sphere, which is an interesting metaphor, in a marketplace of ideas, where we will all argue like in the agora of ancient Greece. We will meet and argue and tell stories and come to decisions and have disagreements and lies, but we're part of a community where facts matter, where empathy matters, and that makes for effective democracy. So that dream is going away very fast. I think Marcy Shaw was right to say America feels like a cold civil war already. Everybody is using information purely as a weapon, not as a tool of common, collaborative communication and action. So in a sense, we are all now in a sort of war. My first 2 books warned about that. I think now, frankly, we have to make sure we win. What does that mean? That doesn't mean we have to start using lots of disinformation or lies. But let's take the Russians. They're one actor. If we start approaching this in a way to win, then we would have to start thinking less about fact-checking, yeah? By the time you're doing fact-checking, you've lost. You would start thinking about it in a military way. What is the propaganda supply chain? Where is the funding? Where does it rely on platforms? Who are the oligarchs that it depends on? How do we destroy those pillars? Where are the weak links? Think of it like you would a military supply chain. When we think about audiences, we have to understand we're in a race. Who will understand audiences better? They work like cult leaders. They work out of vulnerability, yeah? People are resentful. People are angry. People are frustrated. And they tap into that, and they exploit that. We have to start working at that level, working with those emotions, and start working with them in a way that's productive. So conspiracy theories. Number 1, post-pravda example, yeah, the use of conspiracy theories. I and my colleagues in Ukraine, we did a lot of research into why people believe conspiracy theories. It's often connected to a sense of a lack of agency, a lack of feeling that you can do something. So the solution is not information. The solution is finding media that makes people feel more empowered, like they have power. Start thinking of media as a social service, yeah? How are we going to help you change something rather than how we will inform you? That's a total change. It means starting in a very different place. You can still use facts, you can still use investigations, you can still use democratic tools, you can still use the law, but you have to start thinking about it in that way. Or Marcy Shaw's future is upon us very soon.
Це чудовий спосіб. На жаль, ми вже маємо закінчувати. Це було дуже хороше питання і аж занадто хороша відповідь, тому що вона була дуже довгою і вичерпною. І, на жаль, у нас нема більше часу, але дуже важливо сказати...
Так, через місяць моя книга буде вже готова. У мене буде маленьке турне по Україні. Я буду виступати в Харкові, в Запоріжжі та тут в Києві. Це буде останній тиждень червня та перший тиждень липня. І я думаю, що мені здається, що вже можна купувати книгу в інтернеті.
Книжка виходить у видавництві «Меридіан Черновіць» з українською мовою в кінці цього місяця. І зараз є передзамовлення, я щойно перевірила, з хорошою знижкою, до речі. Тому на сайті «Меридіан Черновіць» ви можете передзамовити український переклад книжки Пітера «Як виграти інформаційну війну» і почитати про всі ці чудові пригоди доповіді Сефтона Делмера під час Другої світової про те, як пропаганда насправді працює і чому і всю цю історію про порнографічну складову, яка дуже дивна і цікава.
І дякую всім за вашу лінгвістичну толерантність. Дякую.